Very good afternoon to you. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. This hour... Well, it was certainly far more peaceful than... Not that that clip would exemplarise that, but it was certainly far more peaceful than the thuggery we've seen on the streets of this country in the last few weeks. But the disruption it caused, and that Just Stop Oil planned to cause, would have been, in theory, far greater than what we saw on the streets in the last few weeks as well. This afternoon, we're told that the 5 Just Stop Oil activists who were convicted for conspiring to block the M25 have appealed against their record sentences, claiming the terms breached international law and are longer than those handed to rioters. Roger Hallam was jailed for 5 years for coordinating the protests that disrupted the M25 in London over 4 days in 2022. 45 protesters climbed gantries on the motorway. Traffic was forced to stop. And he was also convicted of conspiracy to cause further disruption by blocking the entirety of the motorway. 4 of his accomplices were jailed for 4 years each. They are appealing those sentences, which they're absolutely entitled to do, on the basis that the terms breached international law and are longer than the ones that we're seeing handed out to those people who caused a lot of trouble over the last few weeks. On those people, we've had a man jailed for 16 months today after pleading guilty to affray, assault by beating of an emergency worker, and assault by beating in Brighton last week. 154 people have so far been charged with violent disorder alone. Which does feel a bit weird, doesn't it? That someone who was violent gets significantly less time in prison than someone who wasn't violent. But then I wonder whether it's fair to compare apples and pears. These are 2 entirely different circumstances. The bloke who hit an emergency worker pleaded guilty, for which there is mitigation. The JSO crowd did not. The Just Stop Oil crowd conspired to bring the entire M25 to a standstill with all the consequences, possibly actually fatal consequences, that may have brought about. Roger Hallam is a repeat offender as well, which is obviously going to go against him. Do you think in the face of the jail time being handed out for violence on the streets of this country relatively recently, the Just Stop Oil sentences are justifiable? I think they can be shown to be justifiable. What about you? 03456060973, 7 minutes past 5. Gill Tavner is a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. So what is it about the sentence of those caught up in or committing the violence in the last few weeks makes the sentences for some of the people that you work with unjustifiable?
Tom, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask a question? Because I'd like to start...
sorry, Jill. I'm going to start this.
It's just a really quick one.
No. Sorry. I'm going to start this interview by asking you a question. If you wouldn't mind trying to answer it, and then we can get into what you'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Just could you repeat it then, because I was practicing my line.
The people who were convicted of causing thuggery and violence on the streets have had lower sentences in prison than your colleagues. Why are your colleagues saying that means that their prison sentences should be lower?
I think if you look, Michael Forst of the UN has said that the day that the Whole Truth 5, we call them, the ones who just want to raise the alarm about the direction in which we're heading, were sentenced, was a dark day which should put us all on high alert on the state of civil rights and freedom in the UK. And I think, I don't think that the 5 who were imprisoned for what they did. They were imprisoned because of the interests that we as Just Stop Oil challenge. Can I just ask, did you study... I'm an English teacher. I've been an English teacher for 25 plus years. Did you study Lord of the Flies? Because I imagine a lot of your audience did when you were in for GCSE or for O-level. I think you were GCSE.
I think I was GCSE. Yes, I read Lord of the Flies, yeah.
Right, if you don't mind me traumatising some of your audience by reminding them of this, but you may remember that, on one side you had Ralph, Piggy and Simon, who kind of, in an analogy, represented good sense, science and spirituality. And on the other side, you had the irresponsible leadership of Jack, who just wanted to party and was supported by the sinister Roger. And basically, Simon, Ralph and Piggy knew that they had to confront the fear that was at the heart of everything that was going on. And Simon actually said, what else is there to do? We have to be responsible. We have to confront the fear. And he was killed as a consequence. Jack, on the other hand, wanted to perpetuate the fear because that meant having fun. And eventually, they burned the whole island to a cinder, with a couple of deaths along the way.
Yes.
So basically, the longer they avoided confronting their fears, the more easily they were controlled by irresponsible leadership. And the sort of less civilised they became and the more violent they became. And look, as a mother of 2 daughters, aged 19 and 21, I do not want my society to become less civilised and more violent, whatever the cause may be, okay? Right. Whether that's because of fascists on the streets and riots, or whether it's
the entire closure of the
or
the entire closure of the M25, which is what your colleagues conspired to do.
I don't think that was going to cause the absolute breakdown of the rule of law.
I'm not suggesting that it's going to cause the absolute breakdown of the rule of law. You're the one that brought the Lord of the Flies up. They didn't just want to raise the alarm, though, did they? They wanted to bring the entire M25 to a halt. That would have meant emergency services, would not have been able to get through. That could, in theory, have killed people.
Tom, in normal times, that really would have been an outrageous thing for Just Stop Oil to do.
But that's what they were planning to do, Jill. That's why they've gone to prison for a long time.
Not as outrageous, and you have to accept, and I'm sure your audience accept, it is nothing like throwing bricks at policemen, about barricading people into a hotel and setting it on fire, setting fire to a library, which you know is a symbolic
How long have the people who did that been sent to prison for, Jill? The people who set fire to that hotel, how long have they been sent to prison for?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm sorry, I've been working 24/7. I've got a full-time job.
It's a reasonable question to ask, because you raised it. Yeah. They haven't been sentenced yet. So there is a circumstance in which people who are charged with some very serious offences, including the offence of rioting, or indeed, as we were being told by the Director for Public Prosecutions, would be charged with offences that fall under the banner of terrorist offences, they will go to prison for a lot longer than your colleagues have gone to prison.
I'm not here to argue for longer prison sentences for anyone. You know, just as on Lord of the Flies, a lot of the boys who commit some of the atrocities are just extremely frightened and are whipped up into a frenzy of violence. And, you know, you just said about this on your news about, you know, the young girl. So that's not what I'm here to argue about. I'm here to say that we need to raise the alarm. That's what Ralph did. That's what Jack did. That's what Pig did. They said, look, we're in real danger of breaking down our society here and no one's listening. And what else is there to do but to try to raise this alarm?
Right.
Look, no one wants to be causing disruption. No one wants to face the courts. No one wants to spend time in prison. And yet, I guess that what they felt before doing it is, what else is there to do? Because we have reached a point of real desperation here. We have to... The science demands that we stop burning oil and gas by 2030.
Fine.
Otherwise,
so, Jill, you think...
disruption of the M25 is just... It's going to seem like nothing. I'm not downplaying it now.
So the closure of the M25 is nothing as compared to, and therefore justified, compared to the impending doom that we're about to face of Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, Tom, I don't know what's justified in this world that we're in at the moment.
Well, I'll tell you what, conspiring to close the M25.
Raise the alarm. And we just have to. We've got to get rid of this delusional belief that we can continue as usual without any consequence.
Jill, by your own logic of saying nothing very much matters in the face of planetary...
Everything matters. Everything matters in the face of planetary decline. Everything we love and everything we care about. So, that's why we're fighting.
So bringing the M25 to a standstill does matter.
Yeah, it matters.
Right. So that's why your colleagues have been sent to prison.
Causing disruption, but it does not. It does not deserve a 5-year sentence or a 4-year sentence.
So what does it deserve?
And look, these rules have been brought in, as you know, by Policy Exchange, a right-wing think tank funded by the fossil fuel industry, by Exxon. Okay. Our our legal system is being bought in things like this. And these people are there for facing and challenging the fossil fuel industry, not for what they did. I mean, Roger was there. Every single person who takes action with Just Stop Oil has non-violent training in taking non-violent action.
Brilliant.
It's the core of what we do and who we are.
So what consequence should have befallen your colleagues who chose to do this disruption and who conspired to bring the entire M25 to a halt? What consequence should they face?
I don't know. I'm not legal. I'm not here to mete out their sentences. I do know...
But you agree they should go to prison?
The legal minds are saying that if that had been the law in USA in 1963, Martin Luther King would not... You know, the laws we've got at the moment stopping us from speaking the truth in court even now.
That's not true.
Martin Luther King wouldn't have made his speech. You know, we wouldn't have civil rights.
It's just not true, Jill.
It is a clampdown on really important things.
What the judge prevented from happening in court was the apparent justification of your actions on the basis of your belief that we're heading into absolute planetary meltdown.
Sorry, I've got to stop. It's not our belief. in the face of the scientific knowledge that, please get that right, please.
The judge decided that isn't going to act as mitigation in trying to do these kinds of conspiring to commit these kinds of criminal activities.
I don't know if you know about the case very much, but he argued that if you assume you've got a responsible government, then no breaking of the law is justifiable. But just to put that in context, that was after 2022, the hottest summer we've had.
Yes.
In October, the government licensed more laws. So you could potentially argue that we didn't actually have a responsible government.
Fine, so which is it then?
That meeting took place 1 month later.
Well, again, I use what you say as to further the argument that there should be some consequence for what happened to your colleagues in trying to stop the M25 or not.
As I've told you, I'm not a legal mind, and we never take any action and try to escape the consequences. But I think most reasonable people out there will agree that this sentencing is, can't think of the word, but it's not proportionate, particularly when compared with the sentencing that's happening now. I think anyone with a reasonable way of looking at things would agree with that. And I actually think the media needs to stop trying to frame Just Stop Oil as the troublemakers. You know, we don't want societal breakdown for any reason. And we know we cause disruption because look, at this time in history, please don't laugh, but at this time in history, it's hard to accept, but it really is on the shoulders of our global generation to face something that's never been faced before. And if we don't act, what is it? Our children will be next. Okay, and I care about my children. I'm sure you do about yours. And I don't want them... Look, we've just got bigger fires than ever in Greece, the hottest year ever, the hottest month. We've got failing crops in the UK, failing crops in Spain, floods washing away villages in Switzerland, fire in the States, fire and flood in Canada. And yet, you know, we're arguing between a few months here and there on a sentence. You know, we accept the consequences. Of course, we're going to appeal because no one wants to be in prison for doing a peaceful Zoom protest. And anyone who listens will know that that's unreasonable, okay? But what else do we do? We've done all the reasonable things. We've done all the petitions. We've signed things. We just need to raise the alarm because the science says we have next to no time at all to make the future less bad than it's going to be. And that's what we have to try to do. And that's why we say you have to stop oil and gas by 2030.
Okay.
And for those who say you can't do that, the Second World War was won in 5 years. People made huge sacrifices. We're not being asked to send our sons to war. We're just being asked to act responsibly, change our systems as quickly as possible and as far as possible to stop burning oil and gas. Why the fuss? Why the obstacles? And I know the answers to that. It's the vested interest, the immense power of the giant, the loud, scary giant of the fossil fuel industry. And they're not going to go down without a fight. Okay. Of course they're not. We've known that all along.
Thank you very much indeed for coming on. Gill Tavner, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. 5:21 is the time. Peter, you're going to win Message of the Day. I think it's a new competition I've just started. Tom, typical Just Stop Oil, spoil everything. I've just started reading Lord of the Flies. Yeah, it was a bit... I had to wrestle the conch back. Steve's in Guildford. Steve, what do you make of their complaint?
Well, I've been cooking dinner, but to be honest with you, it's a two-prong argument, this one. First one is, I've been hearing commentators today, ex-leaders of the anti-terrorist group, saying that the actions of people up in the north and what's happened last weekend borders on terrorism. Yet the anti-terror laws protect our infrastructure, which this Just Stop Oil group have been hell-bent on trying to stop it working for years. So to me, it's an act of terrorism.
Well, that's good of you, Steve.
Funny.
That's good of you.
We had the Animal League class of terrorists.
I don't think there were
in the
actually
90s.
Did we?
Yes, we did. Yeah, there was all anti-terrorists because of the way they were reacting, blowing cars up and whatever. But they was good, and an infrastructure is actually ceased to operate in a country. It is.
Well, that's Steve. Steve, the conspiracy to bring the entire M25 to a standstill is going to result in a big prison sentence because it would be pretty catastrophic for the southeast of England if the M25 as a whole were blocked. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the person who unfortunately gets into an accident on the M25 and shuts the whole thing is going to go to prison because they didn't conspire to do it. These people did. That's why they've gone to prison for a long time. But in the face of what you see going through the courts at the moment after the last 10 days of violence, you've got a bloke here who thumped an emergency worker. There was another assault by beating. There was a fray, 16 months in prison.
Yeah, it sounds like a night out on a Saturday night. Compared to the riots of 2011, it's completely absolute rubbish.
Out to me, but... So you think he should go to prison for longer?
And on a legal standpoint, these people who got put through the courts, and you can call nothing else but kangaroo courts, right against our judicial system, no reports done, nothing done. So they were put in front of a magistrate or a Crown Court, next day they were in jail. Not a problem. They take it on the chin. That's the way it is. But if you look at our judicial system, that is a big breach of what we actually stand by in this country.
All right. Steve, thank you for the call. Tony's in Fareham. Hi, Tony.
Yes, hi, Tom. Good afternoon. Yeah, I think the sentence is justified, and I'm probably quite lenient as far as I'm concerned, really. And I think as far as the people that I talk to, they think it's reasonably lenient because these people have been warned before about their conduct. It's not that they're first-time offenders. They've been in and out the courts before and been no doubt told that should they persist, that they'll go to prison.
Yeah.
So they've got no one to blame but themselves as far as I'm concerned.
Let me put this to you, Tony. This is coming on 84850. Tom Swarbrick using the argument of the establishment in the face of the clear argument from the Just Stop Oil representative. Stopping traffic on the M25 is insignificant compared to the destruction of the planet. Is that not obvious, says this texter?
Yes, but I mean, most people in the country appreciate what's happening with global warming, and most people, they recycle as I do, and they use their cars less as I do. A lot of responsible people. So my view is if they really want to make a point, take a flight to Beijing. Chain yourselves up outside the British Embassy in Beijing, and you'll get a lot more sympathy from people like me.
They chain themselves up outside the British Embassy in Beijing. But Tony, I take the point. It's used a lot. Thank you very much indeed. To the point the texter made. Yes, in the face of planetary decline and the destruction of the planet, stopping traffic on the M25 is massively insignificant. You're completely right, but it's also not a justification for doing it. It doesn't mean you can go and block the M25 in its entirety because you're saying that the destruction of the planet is inevitable and imminent. You're going to have to face the consequences of conspiring to block the entirety of the M25, just as presumably in that world of saying, well, it's all insignificant in the face of planetary destruction, you would argue that the rioter, a man who pleaded guilty to a fray, assault by beating of an emergency worker and assault by beating in Brighton last week, shouldn't go to prison either. Because in the face of planetary destruction, what's thumping a copper got to do with it? Madness, doesn't work. Michael's in Bushy. Michael.
Hi, Tom. Yeah, thank you very much. I think the sentences are fully justifiable. Basically, the M25 is a main artery for London and going around London. On that particular day, they held up people who missed flights. They've held up people who couldn't get to funerals, couldn't get to hospitals, and they caused absolute chaos. My own company alone was affected by this, couldn't get deliveries in for about 4 or 5 hours. And basically, I think if it acts as a deterrent, they won't do it again. And I think you've got to have a deterrent, and maybe this will show an example that the courts are not going to stand for this.
Is that true of the person who's been sentenced to 16 months in prison for the beating of an emergency worker? Is that a deterrent?
I'm not a lawyer, and sometimes you can always say certain things, and there's not being bad language. The law is a bit of an ass. Some of the sentences are given out. But, there's obviously circumstantial evidence on each case, and each judge or magistrate, they discuss it amongst themselves and make it right. So I think in the case of the M25, where they were up on gantries and it took ages of people to get them down, and people's lives were in danger, I think it was fully justified. With regards to the sentences for people shouldn't throw things. They should have respect for the police and other people.
I think, Michael, the question to those who think that maybe the Just Stop Oil sentences are unduly harsh, particularly in the face of the rioters, is exactly to the previous texter, which is, well, if you're saying that in the face of planetary destruction, nothing much matters other than the restoration of the planet, why are we punishing these people for only raising the issue? Presumably you have to be fair and say, well, for those people who also thumped a copper, why are they going to prison because the destruction of the planet matters more? Or is it only the criminality those who are wanting to raise the issue commit that should go unpunished? Chris has been waiting patiently to get on the radio in Barnet. Hi, Chris.
I think that the judge who sentenced these people to
prison should get struck off. Basically, if we don't make an issue of what's happening around the world at the moment with the facts that we have, then, what do? Do we wait until it's too late? Because you are afraid of what's happening, you see that's the reality that it is, then you fear for your family, for yourself, for your children, for your grandchildren. And the people who are making the right noise, getting put in prison, then I think this judge should not be able to judge anymore because his judgment is flawed.
So, Chris, do you think that people who conspire to bring the M25 to an entire halt and, in fact, do attempt to do that, do you think because they've done it in the name of raising the issue of climate change, they shouldn't have to go to prison?
No, because nobody's listening to them. They are doing what they can, but nobody's listening to them. The government is not listening to them. Nobody's listening to them.
So if the person in Brighton who thumped a police officer says, I did this in part because I wanted to draw attention to the issue of climate change, should they go to prison?
Hang on a minute. If somebody's holding a gun to your head, look, all these things about Gaza, all these gatherings and everything,
Gaza.
They are justified to an extent. But this is more justified than the gathering.
I'm trying to get to what it ultimately would justify. So if a bloke thumped a police officer and said, I did it to draw attention to climate change, do you think that person should go to prison?
No, they're not doing that. What they're doing is they're trying to bring our attention to the seriousness of what's happening around us.
By breaking the law.
Nobody's listening to them.
By breaking the law.
Hang on a minute. The law is made by people. That is the wrong law. I don't know if you ever heard of Lord Wolf. Yes. Lord Wolf said that if a law is no good, then you shouldn't justify it.
Chris, I think your attention is being demanded elsewhere. It sounds like a busy household. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. I think your argument is complete and utter bonkers. Oliver's in Stafford. Hi, Oliver.
Hey, Tommy boy. How are you, mate?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, good, man. I'm just a big fan.
Okay.
They're not just conspiring. Well, they weren't just conspiring to stop the whole M25. You've got to think about how important our motorways are and how many businesses and emergency services and all things that would be good if they got delivered or if they got there on time. And you've got to just think about how many things they actually did stop from taking place.
The reason why they got such hefty sentences was because of the plan to stop the M25 in its entirety, and that conspiracy to do that is why they were sentenced so heavily. In part justified by the previous criminality and law-breaking that had been undertaken by, in one case, Roger Hallam, who was the main ringleader of it. That's why he got 5 years. They're obviously looking at what the rioters are getting and saying, well, hang on, some of these people are barely spending more than a year in prison. How unfair is that?
Well, I think they went out, yes, to riot, but what they did was kind of a spontaneous action, whereas Just Oil saw the hurt that they were making happen, and they continued to do it over weeks.
Yeah.
They didn't stop when they saw how many people were really being hurt. And that's why I think the sentences should be more, if anything, but definitely not less.
Well, I think the damage that would be caused by the entire M25 being blocked would, and I can understand why people might drop their tea as they hear this, but would be greater. The damage done to people, possibly to lives, certainly livelihoods, would be greater than, unfortunately, someone hitting a police officer. Yeah,
it's not nice to say, but it is true. I mean, my job, I deliver cancer treatment.
Right.
I do about 12,000 miles every month, and what I deliver is time sensitive.
Really?
It's a isotope that has to get there in a certain time. So our company was really affected, and obviously your mums, your nans, your dads, your sons, all of them that are waiting treatment, Just Oil are the reason that they didn't get it. And so you've got to think about these different anecdotes of what the massive amount of hurt that Just Oil did cause. And it's not just about one bobby who went home, oh God, that brick hurt. It was a much bigger thing, I would say.
And you don't have any truck with the notion, Oliver, that none of this matters in the face of planetary decline and existential threat from climate change?
Well, that's just silly, isn't it? Because you can apply that to anything. So I can just walk down the street naked because the world's going to end in 10, 20, 30 years.
Exactly.
Silly argument, I think.
I totally agree with you. Oliver, thank you very much indeed for the call. Keith's in Worcester. Keith.
Hi, Tom.
Sir.
Right, I think that the protests are morally justified. I'm not going to say they're legally justified because obviously they are against the law, but I think they are morally justified. And the reason why I say that is back in the 1970s, right, my dad, who is an architect, or a retired architect now, in fact, he designed a house, and it was this beautiful house built into the side of a hill. It had purple bricks all the way around it, which absorbed all the heat. Around the outside of the house, outside of the purple bricks, was the walkway, the hallway that the people could walk around. And then outside of that was, giant panes of glass. So it acted like essentially it was a giant solar panel house. It was this beautiful thing back in the 1970s. And he designed that based on the idea that we've got this problem of global resources and global warming happening back then. Now, back then we also had protests regarding global warming. They were mainly taking place by groups like Greenpeace and that kind of thing. But people just dismissed them as bearded weirdos and tree huggers, So,
well, I have to say, Keith, I'm not sure coming on and talking about comparisons with Lord of the Flies helps, really. As a tactic to
I
portray
was
yourself as a serious
completely
organisation.
lost with Lord of the Flies. I must admit, I've never read it, so I was completely lost with that.
I've read it, and I still wasn't following it particularly closely. I mean, it was just bizarre, to be honest with you. But you still feel that it is morally justifiable to block the M25 in its entirety in order to raise the issue of climate change?
Well, my point is this. We have been going for 50 years with peaceful protests. The Green Group have been going for 50 years. I say we, I'm not actually part of it. Right. But the Green Group have been going for 50 years with peaceful protests. And the country as a whole is now in a bad place with regards to climate change, and the world as a whole is in a bad place with regards to climate change.
The world definitely is. I'm not sure about Britain specifically, which has done quite a lot to reduce its carbon emissions and is going to do a lot more given the government's desire to go and build many more solar farms, many more offshore wind and onshore wind. Good thing too. But yes, you're right. The weather doesn't know borders, does it? So I guess in that sense, we're all in it together. Keith, appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. 5:51 is the time. Well, that was weird.
The sort of slide that got you to turn that saved your life, really, was the illegal immigration slide. Maybe this, maybe this is worth talking about that.
It was
that slide. That slide says
you're
saved
right.
your life.
No, the illegal immigration saved my life. You're right, but it was it had to be at that exact angle.
I mean, that's a great one.
Yeah. Donald Trump sat down with billionaire Elon Musk for a rambling and at times vitriolic interview that revisited many of the former president's most apparently divisive talking points. The interview was on X, which obviously is owned by Elon Musk. Didn't start particularly well. There were technical issues which initially prevented many users from actually watching it. Musk blamed the delay on a massive cyber attack, but the cause of the glitch was not entirely clear. Daniel Lippman is a Washington, D.C. reporter for Politico. Thanks for coming on the programme, Daniel. It was a mess, wasn't it? The whole thing was a mess.
It was. It reminded me of the Ron DeSantis campaign launch on X.
Yes.
Must have been a year or so ago, where there were similar glitches, and obviously they have not fixed them. And the whole point of a campaign, and especially a campaign launch or a big interview like this, is to get your message out. And Trump, there was a 35-minute delay, and it was just a kind of an odd interview throughout.
Does Donald Trump have a lisp?
Well, I think that is a good question. He accused Biden and Harris of not being able to talk properly, and so people were wondering: is this a lisp? Is this something that speaking on a speakerphone like he was doing interview? Taking the questions, he was doing it from Mar-a-Lago, and Elon Musk was not there in person. and so it might have kind of created muffled sounds and just audio oddities.
Elon Musk came out quite strongly in support of Donald Trump, didn't he?
He did. He had endorsed him an hour after the assassination attempt a month ago, and they seem to kind of be of similar. They like each other as billionaires, as successful people, but of course it's ironic because Elon Musk's a huge part of his business career and his wealth is from electric cars, which is not always very popular with Republicans and Trump supporters.
Well, wasn't fundamentally the reason for Musk doing this to persuade Donald Trump to go back onto his platform?
I think that was part of it, but also for Elon Musk, this is a good opportunity to have free advertising for X, where people who may have dropped off the service, maybe they were going to listen to Trump's interview with Musk, and kind of cement his relationship by Trump. It's not like he was grilling him with tough questions. There were some questions that were more aggressive, but mostly it was a lot of fawning over each other.
Daniel, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel Lippman, who is a Washington, D.C. reporter for Politico. Barry has called from Battersea on the Just Stop Oil convictions. Hi, Barry.
Oh, hi. I just totally support the people that are doing all that stuff, because the amount of people that are dying every year from breathing difficulties, and they're going on about an ambulance getting held up. But what about all the people, hundreds and hundreds of people that are dying every year,
There are more than hundreds and hundreds of people dying every year, but do we know to what extent they're dying because of climate change?
Well, that's why the diesels have been banned in London because of it. Most diesels, unless you've got a Euro 6 engine, you can't drive in London.
To clean up the air, that's a good thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, if I had a business and I had all these big massive lorries like Sainsbury's and Tesco's, and they're massive things, were spewing out diesel fumes all over the place,
right,
and I was killing people doing that, I'd be locked up in 5 seconds.
I'm not sure that would be true. And what's the proposal? That everyone moves to an electric van or an electric car?
If I drove my car down the road and there was, say, the rings had gone on my engine, and there was big clouds of smoke pouring out back, which a lot of people probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, if your car
got stopped by the police,
if it wasn't roadworthy, Barry, you'd get into trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, but
if it's roadworthy,
if you've got hundreds and hundreds of lorries, then if you was to put that all into one vehicle, that wouldn't be roadworthy. That would be spewing out untold. But people don't realise...
Where's the 100-engine van that's currently...
Yeah, but because it's spread about, people don't seem to get it. Yeah, and also, Keir Starmer, he's done this. The judge that's sentenced them, he needs to be struck off.
Right,
because Keir Starmer's deliberately done this to try and act like he's the big tough guy,
Keir Starmer's not involved in the sentencing of Just Stop Oil.
Yes, he is.
In what way?
He said that there will be... last week... He said that they'll be sentenced and put it. Well, when all the riots things happened last week, he's going, right, anyone that's basically gets in his way, he's going to lock them up and do it all really, really quick. But you can't do that.
Why
These
not?
people last week that got locked up, you can't do that.
Why
you
can't
have
you
to
do
have
that?
report because you have to have reports.
What report?
That's a standard.
What report?
If you get done for a crime,
yes,
and you go in front of the judge, and you've been shoplifting, say,
yes,
and you've been doing it, you've been caught like 3 times in the last month, they're going to say to you, OK, we need 3-week adjournment for reports. And probation will then contact you. You go in there for a meeting. They need to find out a lot more about
Barry, if you plead guilty...
Why you think that way, why you act that way, why you're doing what you're doing.
But, Barry, if you plead guilty, someone says, right, we caught you 3 times, how'd you plead? You go guilty... Then it's
what are you talking about?
You don't need a court case, do you? You
have to have reports before you're sentenced, and that's been completely waved off. And I think they should all appeal and use that as part of it because they'll win.
All right, Barry, appreciate it. Thank you. Rick's in Croydon. Rick.
Hi, Tom. If we say that the oilers getting 5 years is fair, let's just assume that's fine, then I suspect that the rioters should get 5 years also. Because at least the oilers' argument...
Depends what crime they've committed, doesn't it?
The crime is, if you say the Oilers are worried about a crime which is existential relating to the climate, the breakdown of society, in my opinion, is equally important. With the disrespect that these people are showing the whole country, you can basically get away with almost anything you like.
But you can't.
And the penalty will be peanuts.
But you can't.
Whereas you can talk about disrupting the M25 and you'll get 5 years.
But Rick, you can understand why the damage caused to the country of having the M25 brought to a standstill by protesters who claim that they are morally within their rights to do so would unfortunately be far greater, affect far more people than the punching of a single police officer.
Initially, but if you have a look and see let's say the Croydon riots happened over a period of 4 days.
Yes.
These ones took even longer. So the bandwagon starts rolling and people start becoming less and less worried about the consequences of their actions.
But they should be, because you can see the consequences. There are people going to prison now.
Well, they should. They set fire to hotels and blockade the hotels, and people inside couldn't get out.
I agree.
So what I'm saying, and you spoke to a lot of these right-wing rioters last week. You know as well as I do, they have no cogent argument to present to you as to what they were protesting.
Rick, I agree.
At least the lady with the Lord of the Flies had some argument.
Well, she might have had some justification, but that, I'm afraid, doesn't give her an excuse to break the law.
Yeah, I agree. I agree there.
Okay, so I forgot what we're arguing about. I've forgotten what we're arguing about.